Hello and welcome to the listeners. Let's continue to the next part of article Open Letter, written by Gandhi in 1894 December. It says, "The second head of the inquiry is the most important, viz., what are they, and I request you to peruse it carefully. My purpose in writing on this subject will have been served if only it stimulates a study of India and its people. For I thoroughly believe that 1/2 or even 3/4 of the hardships entailed upon the Indians in South Africa result from want of information about India. No one can be more conscious than myself of whom I am addressing this letter to. Some honorable members may resent this portion of my letter as an insult. To such I say with the greatest deference, I am aware that you know a great deal about India. But is it not a cruel fact that the colony is not the better for your knowledge? Certainly the Indians are not, unless the knowledge acquired by you is entirely different from and opposed to that acquired by others who have worked on the same field. Again, although this humble effort is directly addressed to you, it is supposed to reach many others, in fact all who have an interest in the future of the colony with its present inhabitants. In spite of the Premier's opinion to the contrary, as expressed in his speech at the second reading of the Franchise Bill, with the utmost deference to his honor, I venture to point out that both the English and the Indians spring from a common stock, called the Indo-Aryan. I would not be able, in support of the above, to give extracts from many authors, as the books of reference at my disposal are unfortunately very few. I, however, quote as follows from Sir W. Hunter's Indian Empire. This nobler race, meaning the early Aryans, belonged to the Aryan or Indo-Germanic stock from which the Brahmin, the Rajput, and the Englishman alike descend. Its earliest home visible to history was in Central Asia. From that common camping ground, certain branches of the race started for the east, others for the west. One of the western offshoots founded the Persian kingdom, another built Athens and Lacedaemon, and became the Hellenic nation. A third went on to Italy and reared the city on the Seven Hills, which grew into imperial Rome. A distant colony of the same race excavated the silver ores of prehistoric Spain, and when we first catch a sight of ancient England, we see an Aryan settlement, fishing in wattle canoes and working the tin mines of Cornwall. The forefathers of the Greek and the Roman, of the Englishman and the Hindu, dwelt together in Asia, spoke the same tongue, and worshipped the same gods. The ancient religions of Europe and India had a similar origin. Thus, it will be seen that the learned historian, who must be supposed to have consulted all the authorities, without a shadow of doubt, makes the above unqualified assertion. If then I err in good company. And the belief, whether mistaken or well-founded, serves as the basis of operations of those who are trying to unify the hearts of the two races, which are, legally and outwardly, bound together under a common flag. A general belief seems to prevail in the colony that the Indians are little better, if at all, than savages or the natives of Africa. Even the children are taught to believe in that manner, with the result that the Indian is being dragged down to the position of a raw kafir. Such a state of things, which the Christian legislators of the colony would not, I firmly believe, wittingly allow to exist and remain, must be my excuse for the following copious extracts, which will show at once that the Indians were and are in no way inferior to their Anglo-Saxon brethren, if I may venture to use the word, in the various departments of life, industrial, intellectual, poetical, and so. As to the Indian philosophy and religion, the learned author of the Indian Empire thus sums up. The Brahman solutions to the problems of practical religion were self-discipline, alms, sacrifice to and contemplation of the deity. But, besides the practical questions of the spiritual life, religion has also intellectual problems, such as the compatibility of evil with the goodness of God, and the unequal distribution of happiness and misery in this life. Brahman philosophy has exhausted the possible solutions of these difficulties, and of most of the other great problems which have since perplexed the Greek and Roman sage, medieval schoolman and modern man of science. The various hypotheses of creation, arrangement, and development were each elaborated, and the views of physiologists at the present day are a return with new lights to the evolution theory of Kapila. The works on religion published in the native language in India in 1877 numbered 192, besides 56 on mental and moral philosophy. In 1882, the totals had risen to 545 on religion and 153 on mental and moral philosophy. Max Muller says with regard to Indian philosophy, the following and a few more that will follow have been partly or wholly quoted in the franchise petition. If I were asked under what sky the human mind has most fully developed some of its choicest gifts, has most deeply pondered on the greatest problems of life, and has found solutions of some of them, which well deserve the attention even of those who have studied Plato and Kant, I should point to India. And if I were to ask myself from what literature we here in Europe, we who have been nurtured almost exclusively on the thoughts of Greeks and Romans and of one Semitic race, the Jewish, may draw that corrective which is most wanted in order to make our inner life more perfect, more comprehensive, more universal, in fact more truly human, a life not for this life only, but a transfigured and eternal life. Again, I should point to India. The German philosopher Schopenhauer thus adds his testimony to the grandeur of Indian philosophy as contained in the Upanishads. From every sentence deep, original, and sublime thoughts arise, and the whole is pervaded by a high and holy and earnest spirit. Indian air surrounds us, and original thoughts of kindred spirits. In the whole world there is no study, except that of the originals, so beneficial and so elevating as that of the Upanishads. It has been the solace of my life, it will be the solace of my death. Coming to science, Sir William Hunter says, the science of language, indeed, had been reduced in India to fundamental principles at a time when the grammarians of the West still treated it on the basis of accidental resemblances, and modern philosophy dates from the study of Sanskrit by European scholars. The grammar of Panini stands supreme among the grammars of the world. It arranges in logical harmony the whole phenomena which the Sanskrit language presents, and stands forth as one of the most splendid achievements of human invention and industry. Speaking on the same department of science, Sir H.S. Main, in his Reed Lecture, published in the latest edition of the Village Communities, says, India has given to the world comparative philology and comparative mythology. It may yet give us a new science, not less valuable than the sciences of language and of folklore. I hesitate to call it comparative jurisprudence, because, if it ever exists, its area will be so much wider than the field of law. For India not only contains, or to speak more accurately, did contain, an Aryan language older than any other descendant of the common mother tongue, and a variety of names of natural objects less perfectly crystallized than elsewhere into fabulous personages, but it includes a whole world of Aryan institutions, Aryan customs, Aryan laws, Aryan ideas, Aryan beliefs, in a far earlier stage of growth and development than any which survive beyond its borders. Of Indian astronomy, the same historian Hunter says, the astronomy of the Brahmins has formed alternately the subject of excessive admiration and of misplaced contempt. In certain points, the Brahmins advanced beyond Greek astronomy. Their fame spread throughout the West and found entrance into the Chronicon Paschal. In the 8th and 9th centuries, the Arabs became their disciples. In algebra and arithmetic, I again quote Sir William, the Brahmins attained to a high degree of proficiency independent of Western aid. To them we owe the invention of the numerical symbols on the decimal system. The Arabs borrowed these figures from the Hindus and transmitted them to Europe. The works on mathematics and mechanical science published in the native languages in India in 1877 numbered 89, and in 1882, 166. The medical science of the Brahmins, continues the eminent historian, was also an independent development. The specific diseases whose names occur in Panini's grammar indicate that medical studies had made progress before his time, 350 BC. Arabic medicine was founded on the translations from the Sanskrit treatises. European medicine down to the 17th century was based upon the Arabic. The number of medical works published in the native languages of India in 1877 amounted to 130, and in 1882 to 212, besides 87 on natural science. Writing of the art of war, the writer proceeds. The Brahmins regarded not only medicine, but also the arts of war, music, and architecture as supplementary parts of their divinely inspired knowledge. The Sanskrit epics prove that strategy had attained to the position of a recognized science before the birth of Christ, and the later Agni Purana devotes long sections to its systematic treatment. The Indian art of music was destined to exercise a wider influence. This notation passed from the Brahmins through the Persians to Arabia, and was thence introduced into European music by Guido d'Arezzo at the beginning of the 11th century. On architecture, the same author says, "The Buddhists were the great stone builders of India. Their monasteries and shrines exhibit the history of the art during 22 centuries, from the earliest cave structures of the rock temples to the latest Jain erections dazzling in stucco, overcrowded with ornament. It seems not improbable that the churches of Europe owe their steeples to the Buddhist topes." Hindu art has left memorials which extort the admiration and astonishment of our age. The Hindu palace architecture of Gwalior, the Indian Mohammedan mosques, the mausoleums of Agra and Delhi, with several of the older Hindu temples of southern India, stand unrivaled for grace of outline and elaborate wealth of ornament. English decorative art in our day has borrowed largely from Indian forms and patterns. Indian artworks, when faithful to native designs, still obtain the highest honors at the international exhibitions of Europe. Here is what Andrew Carnegie in his Round the World says about the Taj of Agra. "There are some subjects too sacred for analysis, or even for words. And I now know that there is a human structure, so exquisitely fine or unearthly, as to lift it unto this holy domain. The Taj is built of a light creamy marble, so that it does not chill one as pure cold white marble does. It is warm and sympathetic as a woman." One great critic has freely called the Taj a feminine structure. "There is nothing masculine about it," says he. "Its charms are all feminine. This creamy marble is inlaid with fine black marble lines, the entire Quran in Arabic letters, it is said, being thus interwoven. Till the day I die, amid mountain streams or moonlight strolls in the forest, wherever and whenever the mood comes, when all that is most sacred, most elevated, and most pure recur to shed their radiance upon the tranquil mind, there will be found among my treasures the memory of that lovely charm, the Taj." Nor has India been without its laws, codified or otherwise. The institutes of Manu have always been noted for their justice and precision. So much does Sir H.S. Maine seem to have been struck with their equity, that he calls them an ideal picture of that which, in the view of the Brahmins, ought to be the law. Mr. Pincott, writing in 1891 in the National Review, alludes to them as the philosophical precepts of Manu. Nor have the Indians been deficient in the dramatic art. Goethe thus speaks of Shakuntala, the most famous Indian drama. "Wouldst thou the young year's blossoms and the fruits of its decline, and all by which the soul is charmed, enraptured, feasted, fed? Wouldst thou the earth and heaven itself in one sole name combine? I name thee, O Shakuntala," and all at once is said. Coming to the Indian character and social life, the evidence is voluminous. I can only give meager extracts. I take the following again from Hunter's Indian Empire. The Greek ambassador, Megasthenes, observed with admiration the absence of slavery in India and the chastity of the women and the courage of the men. In valor they excelled all other Asiatics. They required no locks to their doors. Above all, no Indian was ever known to tell a lie. Sober and industrious, good farmers and skillful artisans, they scarcely ever had recourse to a lawsuit and lived peaceably under their native chiefs. The kingly government is portrayed almost as described in Manu, with its hereditary castes of counselors and soldiers. The village system is well described, each little rural unit seeming to the Greek an independent republic. Bishop Heber says of the people of India, "So far as their natural character is concerned, I have been led to form on the whole a very favorable opinion. They are men of high and gallant courage, courteous, intelligent, and most eager after knowledge and improvement. They are sober, industrious, dutiful to their parents, and affectionate to their children, of tempers almost uniformly gentle and patient, and more easily affected by kindness and attention to their wants and feelings than almost any men whom I have met with. Sir Thomas Munro, sometime governor of Madras, says, "I do not exactly know what is meant by civilizing the people of India. In the theory and practice of good government, they may be deficient. But if a good system of agriculture, if unrivaled manufactures, if a capacity to produce what convenience and luxury demand, if the establishment of schools for reading and writing, if the general practice of kindness and hospitality, and above all, if a scrupulous respect and delicacy towards the female sex are amongst the points that denote a civilized people, then the Hindus are not inferior in civilization to the people of Europe." Sir George Birdwood gives the following opinion on the general character of the Indians. "They are long-suffering and patient, hardy and enduring, frugal and industrious, law-abiding and peace-seeking. The educated and higher mercantile classes are honest and truthful, and loyal and trustful towards the British government, in the most absolute sense that I can use, and you understand the words. Moral truthfulness is as marked a characteristic of the Setia, the upper class of Bombay, as of the Teutonic race itself. The people of India, in short, are in no intrinsic sense our inferiors, while in things measured by some of the false standards, false to ourselves, we pretend to believe in, they are our superiors." Sir C. Trevelyan remarks that they have very considerable administrative qualities, great patience, great industry, and great acuteness and intelligence. Of the family relations, thus speaks Sir W. W. Hunter, "There is simply no comparison between Englishmen and Hindus with respect to the place occupied by family interests and family affections in their minds. The love of parents for children and of children for parents has scarcely any counterpart in England. Parental and filial affection occupies among our Eastern fellow citizens the place which is taken in this country by the passion between the sexes." And Mr. Pincott thinks that, in all social matters, the English are far more fitted to sit at the feet of Hindus and learn as disciples than to attempt to become masters. Says M. Louis Jacquelot, "Soil of ancient India, cradle of humanity, hail! Hail, venerable and efficient nurse, whom centuries of brutal invasions have not yet buried under the dust of oblivion. Hail, fatherland of faith, of love, of poetry, and of science. May we hail a revival of thy past in our Western future." Says Victor Hugo, "These nations have made Europe, France, and Germany. Germany is for the Occident that which India is for the Orient. Add to this the facts that India has produced a Buddha, whose life some consider the best and the holiest lived by a mortal, and some to be second only to that lived by Jesus. That India has produced an Akbar, whose policy the British government have followed with but few modifications. That India lost, only a few years ago, a Parsi baronet who astonished not India only, but England also, by his munificent charities. That India has produced Christodas Paul, a journalist, whom Lord Elgin, the present viceroy, compared with the best European journalists. That India has produced Justices Mohammed and Muthukrishna Iyer, both judges of high courts in India, whose judgments have been pronounced to be the ablest delivered by the judges, both European and Indian, who adorn the Indian bench. And, lastly, India has in Badruddin Tyabji, Surendranath Banerjee, and Ferozeshah Mehta, orators who have on many an occasion held English audiences spellbound. Such is India. If the picture appears to you to be somewhat overdrawn or fanciful, it is none the less faithful. There is the other side. Let him who takes delight in separating, rather than in uniting, the two nations give the other side. Then, please, examine both with the impartiality of a Daniel, and I promise that there will yet remain a considerable portion of what has been said above untouched, to induce you to believe that India is not Africa, and that it is a civilized country, in the truest sense of the term, civilization. Before, however, I can quit this subject, I have to crave leave to be allowed to anticipate a possible objection. It will be said, if what you say is true, the people whom you call Indians in the colony are not Indians, because your remarks are not borne out by the practices prevailing among the people whom you call Indians. See how grossly untruthful they are. Everyone I have met within the colony has dwelt upon the untruthfulness of the Indians. To a limited extent, I admit the charge. It will be very small satisfaction for me to show, in reply to the objection, that other classes do not fare much better in this respect, especially if and when they are placed in the position of the unfortunate Indians. And yet, I am afraid I shall have to fall back upon argument of that sort. Much as I would wish them to be otherwise, I confess my utter inability to prove that they are more than human. They come to Natal on starvation wages, I mean here the indentured Indians. They find themselves placed in a strange position and amid uncongenial surroundings. The moment they leave India, they remain throughout life, if they settle in the colony, without any moral education. Whether they are Hindus or Mohammedans, they are absolutely without any moral or religious instruction worthy of the name. They have not learnt enough to educate themselves without any outside help. Placed thus, they are apt to yield to the slightest temptation to tell a lie. After some time, lying with them becomes a habit and a disease. They would lie without any reason, without any prospect of bettering themselves materially, indeed, without knowing what they are doing. They reach a stage in life when their moral faculties have completely collapsed owing to neglect. There is also a very sad form of lying. They cannot dare tell the truth, even for their wantonly ill-treated brother, for fear of receiving ill treatment from their master. They are not philosophic enough to look with equanimity on the threatened reduction in their miserable rations and severe corporal punishment, did they dare to give evidence against their master. Are these men, then, more to be despised than pitied? Are they to be treated as scoundrels deserving no mercy, or are they to be treated as helpless creatures, badly in need of sympathy? Is there any class of people who would not do as they are doing under similar circumstances? But I will be asked what I can have to say in defense of the traitors, who, too, are equally good liars. As to this, I beg to submit that the charge against them is without foundation, and that they do not lie more than the other classes do for the purposes of trade or law. They are very much misunderstood, in the first place because they cannot speak the English language, and secondly, because the interpretation is very defective, through no fault of the interpreters. The interpreters are expected to perform the Herculean task of interpreting successfully in 4 languages like Tamil, Telugu, Hindustani, and Gujarati. The trading Indian invariably speaks Hindustani or Gujarati. Those who speak Hindustani only speak High Hindustani. The interpreters, with one exception, speak the local Hindustani, which is a grotesque mixture of Tamil, Gujarati, and other Indian languages, clothed in extremely bad Hindustani grammar. Very naturally, the interpreter has to argue with the witness before he can get at his meaning. While the process is going on, the judge grows impatient and thinks that the witness is prevaricating. The poor interpreter, if questioned, true to human nature, in order to conceal his defective knowledge of the language, says the witness does not give straight answers. The poor witness has no opportunity of setting himself right. In the case of the Gujarati speakers, the matter is still more serious. There is not a single Gujarati interpreter in the courts. The interpreter, after great difficulty, manages to get at the sense only of what the witness is speaking. I have myself seen the Gujarati-speaking witness struggling to make himself understood, and the interpreter struggling to understand the Gujarati Hindustani. Indeed, it speaks volumes for the acuteness of the interpreters in extracting even the sense from a forest of strange words. But all the while the struggle is going on, the judge makes up his mind not to believe a word of what the witness says and puts him down for a liar. Dear listeners, enough for today? In the next episode, we continue this article called Open Letter, written by Gandhi in December 1894, South Africa. Thank you for listening. This is Mahatma Gandhi Letters.